The refugee fleet arrived at the outer colonies 3 weeks later, limping into human space like wounded animals seeking shelter. President Elena Vasquez stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching the live feeds as hundreds of damaged ships drifted past Mars. Some were venting atmosphere. Others had entire sections torn away by weapons fire. The sheer scale of suffering on those vessels made her chest tight. "They're requesting permission to land," reported the duty officer. "Multiple species, mostly civilians. They're asking for sanctuary." Elena looked at the faces around the room. Admiral Torres wore his usual expression of controlled concern. Dr. Okafor was already analyzing data on her tablet, probably calculating resource requirements. General Chen, Sarah's father, stood with his arms crossed, studying the tactical displays. "Do we know what they're running from?" Elena asked. "The hegemony has launched what they're calling a purification campaign," Dr. Okafor explained, pulling up translated documents on the main screen. "They've decided that certain species are genetically inferior and must be eliminated. The Free Worlds Alliance is collapsing under the assault. These refugees are all that's left of a dozen different civilizations." Elena felt sick. Genocide on a galactic scale. She had read about such things in history books, had promised herself that humanity would never stand by and watch such horrors again, but that was when the victims were human. Now she had to decide if that promise extended to aliens, to beings from worlds she had never seen. "How many are there?" she asked quietly. "Best estimate, 2 million beings across 347 vessels. 2 million refugees. Earth's outer colonies barely had the infrastructure to support their current population. Adding 2 million refugees would strain resources to the breaking point, but turning them away would mean their certain death. We can't let them land on our colonies," Admiral Torres said firmly. "It would compromise our neutrality. The hegemony would see it as an act of war." "Then where do we put them?" Elena challenged. "Space? Let them drift until their life support fails." "There are uninhabited worlds in our territory," suggested General Chen. "We could establish temporary camps, provide basic supplies. Keep them hidden from the main shipping lanes. The hegemony wouldn't need to know. It wasn't ideal, but it was something." Elena made her decision. "Do it. Get those ships to safe harbor. Establish medical facilities and distribution centers. And General, keep this quiet. Use only our most trusted personnel." The largest refugee ship was commanded by Zektar, a member of the wolf-like Varan species. He was tall, covered in gray fur that showed signs of burns and injuries. When he materialized on the communication screen, Elena saw intelligence in his amber eyes, along with deep exhaustion. "Thank you for granting us shelter," Zektar said, his voice translator giving his words a slight mechanical quality. "We have nowhere else to go. The hegemony has destroyed our homeworlds, our colonies, everything we built over thousands of years." "How did this happen?" Elena asked. "The Alliance had hundreds of systems. How did it fall so quickly?" "The hegemony has new weapons, technologies we've never seen before. Ships that can tear through shields like paper, bombs that don't just destroy cities but remake the very atoms of matter. And they have numbers, President Vasquez. For every ship we destroy, they build 10 more." Over the following days, Earth's engineers and doctors worked around the clock to establish refugee camps on 3 uninhabited worlds. Dr. James Wright arrived with the first medical teams, his expertise in xenobiology finally finding practical use. He had studied hundreds of alien species in theory. Now he was treating them in person. The diversity amazed him. There were the Varan with their pack mentality and enhanced senses, the crystalline Chiron who communicated through light patterns, small, fur-covered Picts who were brilliant engineers despite their size, aquatic Near who required specialized water tanks. Each species brought unique biology, culture, and knowledge. "This is incredible," James said to his colleague Dr. Sarah Kimura, as they examined a Pict's child. "These beings have capabilities we never imagined. The Picts can see in spectrums we can't even detect. The Chiron can process information at computer speeds. The Varan have immune systems that can adapt to almost any pathogen. Why would the hegemony want to exterminate them?" Sarah asked. "Because they're different. Because they don't fit the hegemony's narrow definition of superiority." James carefully treated the child's injuries, his instruments adapted for the Pix's small frame. "The hegemony only values strength and obedience. Anything else is weakness to be eliminated." Among the refugees' belongings salvaged from their destroyed homeworlds were fragments of technology that caught the attention of Earth's scientists. Zektar brought several items to President Vasquez personally, spreading them on a table in a secured laboratory. "These are all we managed to save from the ancient sites," he explained. Every species in the Alliance had legends about the precursors, beings who shaped the galaxy millions of years ago. Most thought they were myths, but we found these in deep archaeological sites. We never understood them, but perhaps your scientists will have better luck. Dr. Okafor picked up what looked like a crystalline sphere, no bigger than her fist. Energy patterns swirled inside it, following mathematical rules that made her head hurt to observe. "What is this?" "We don't know. But it reacts to biological presence. We think it might be some kind of data storage, but none of our technology can interface with it." When Dr. Okafor touched the sphere, it pulsed with light. Symbols appeared in the air around it, writing in a language that looked almost familiar. She called for Dr. Wright, who stared at the symbols with growing excitement. "I've seen patterns like this before," he said slowly, "in human DNA. We always thought they were junk sequences, evolutionary leftovers. But what if they're not? What if they're intentional?" The implications were staggering. If humans shared genetic markers with these precursor artifacts, it might mean humanity wasn't as separate from the galactic community as they thought. It might mean they had a connection to these ancient builders, whoever they were, but there was no time to explore these mysteries. 6 weeks after the refugees arrived, Captain Sarah Chen's observation station detected hegemony scout ships entering human space. They were searching, scanning every world and station, following the refugee fleet's trail. Sarah sent an emergency message to Earth. "They're coming. The hegemony knows the refugees are here. They're going to find them." The scouts were followed by a full battle fleet, 50 warships led by a massive dreadnought. Its commander, Lord Admiral Crassus, sent a message that was broadcast across all human channels. His reptilian face filled every screen, cold eyes studying the humans with contempt. "Primitive species of Earth," Crassus began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You harbor enemies of the hegemony. This is an act of war. You will surrender all refugees within 72 hours. Or we will cleanse your worlds as we cleansed theirs. Consider this your only warning." The message ended. Across Earth and its colonies, people stared at their screens in shock. The war they had tried so hard to avoid had found them anyway. The decision to help the refugees, born from compassion and basic decency, had brought the galaxy's most powerful military force to their doorstep. President Vasquez convened an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. The choice before them was impossible: surrender the refugees to certain death, or stand against a force that had destroyed countless civilizations. Either way, humanity's quiet existence was over. Admiral Torres spoke first. "We don't have the military strength to fight them. Our only option is to comply and hope they leave us alone afterward." "And if they don't?" General Chen challenged. "If they decide we're a threat anyway? If they return next year or next decade to finish what they started?" Elena looked at the precursor artifacts on her desk, at the data suggesting humans might be connected to something ancient and powerful. She thought about the refugees, families who had lost everything, who had trusted humanity to protect them. "We have 72 hours, she said finally. "Let's use them wisely. Get every scientist working on those artifacts. Put our military on full alert. And someone find out everything we can about hegemony weaknesses. If we're going to fight, we need every advantage we can find." The observation station hung in the darkness like a forgotten piece of debris. Captain Sarah Chen watched the distant battle through her monitors, her coffee growing cold in her hands. Explosions bloomed across the black canvas of space, each flash representing hundreds or thousands of lives ending in an instant. She had been watching wars for 3 years now, and it never got easier. Another planet just went dark, her communications officer reported quietly. Lieutenant Park's voice carried the weight of their shared helplessness. "That's the 4th one this month." Sarah nodded but said nothing. What could she say? Earth's orders were clear. Observe, record, and do not interfere. The human race had joined the galactic community only 50 years ago, and they remained small fish in an ocean full of predators. 3 massive powers were tearing the galaxy apart, and Earth had chosen to stay invisible, to learn and survive while others fought and died. The war had been raging for 12 years. The hegemony, led by the reptilian Krask, believed in strength above all else. They conquered worlds and enslaved populations, building an empire on fear and military might. Against them stood the consortium, a collective of insectoid species who valued logic and efficiency over individual freedom. They believed the galaxy should be united under their rational rule, where every being served the greater good. Caught between these two giants was the Free Worlds Alliance, a loose group of various species who simply wanted to be left alone. Sarah's station monitored the border between all three factions. From here, hidden by advanced stealth technology, her team documented battle tactics, weapon systems, and diplomatic communications. Everything they learned was sent back to Earth, where analysts tried to understand the complex web of galactic politics. "Captain, you should see this," said Dr. James Wright from the science station. The xenobiologist looked pale, his hands trembling slightly as he transferred data to her screen. "The hegemony just used something new. They're calling it a molecular disruptor. It doesn't just destroy a planet. It breaks down matter at the atomic level." Sarah studied the readings, her stomach turning. An entire world had simply ceased to exist, leaving nothing behind but dust and radiation. Billions of beings gone in seconds. She thought of Earth, of her daughter playing in parks under blue skies, completely unaware of the horrors that existed beyond their peaceful corner of space. "How long until they can threaten our territory?" she asked. "At their current expansion rate? Maybe 20 years. Maybe less if they keep developing weapons like this." 20 years. It seemed like a long time, but Sarah knew better. 20 years ago, humans had barely reached Mars. Now they had colonies on 12 worlds and observation posts scattered across nearby star systems. Technology moved fast and wars moved faster. Back on Earth, the Global Defense Council met in Geneva to discuss the latest reports. Admiral Marcus Torres stood before the assembled representatives, a holographic display showing the war's current state. Red zones marked hegemony territory, blue showed the consortium, and green represented the Free Worlds Alliance. The colors were bleeding together, borders shifting almost daily. "Our policy of neutrality has kept us safe," Admiral Torres argued. "We're too small to matter in their conflicts. The moment we take sides, we become targets." President Elena Vasquez listened carefully. She was a diplomat, not a soldier, but even she could see the danger in remaining passive. "Admiral, what happens when their war reaches our borders? What happens when neutrality is no longer an option? Then we run. We evacuate our outer colonies and fall back to the core systems. Earth has contingency plans." "Running seems like a temporary solution," said Dr. Amira Okafor, the Council's chief science advisor. "These factions have been fighting for over a decade. The war shows no signs of stopping. Eventually, there won't be anywhere left to run." The Admiral's jaw tightened. "What would you have us do? We have 50 warships against their thousands. Our weapons are primitive compared to theirs. We'd be crushed in days." "I'm not suggesting we fight," Dr. Okafor replied. "I'm suggesting we prepare. We study, we learn, and we make sure that when the war does reach us, we're ready." The debate continued for hours, but no decisions were made. Earth would maintain its neutrality, its secrecy, and its hope that the galaxy would somehow forget about the young human civilization. Sarah Chen didn't have the luxury of such debates. She had to watch day after day as the war consumed everything in its path. Her team had become experts at reading the patterns of destruction. They knew which faction favored orbital bombardment and which preferred ground invasions. They understood the logistics of moving fleets across vast distances and the weak points in various ship designs. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual," Lieutenant Park said, breaking the quiet routine of their shift. "Multiple distress signals, all on refugee frequencies." Sarah moved to the communication station, studying the incoming data. Dozens of ships, maybe hundreds, were broadcasting emergency messages. They were civilian vessels, unarmed and unarmored, fleeing from something terrible. "Where are they headed?" she asked. Lieutenant Park ran the calculations, then looked up with worried eyes. "Toward us, Captain. Toward human space." The sensors showed a massive fleet approaching from the direction of the Free Worlds Alliance territory. These weren't warships, but transport vessels, colony ships, and converted freighters. All of them were damaged, many barely functional. Behind them, at the edge of sensor range, was something else. A hegemony battle group, moving with the slow inevitability of approaching doom. "They're running from the hegemony," Dr. Wright observed. "And they're heading straight for Earth's outer colonies." Sarah made a decision that would change everything. "Send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them we have incoming refugees, thousands of them, and they're bringing the war with them. She watched the refugee fleet struggle forward, knowing that in a few days or maybe weeks they would reach human territory. Earth would have to make a choice, turn away beings fleeing for their lives, or open their doors and risk everything they had tried to avoid. The observation station continued its silent watch as the galaxy burned. Sarah thought about her daughter again, about the bedtime stories she told about brave explorers and distant stars. She had never mentioned the wars, the weapons that could destroy planets, or the empires that viewed human life as insignificant. Earth had stayed out of the Galactic War, had built its small corner of peace in a violent universe. But the refugees were coming, and behind them the war followed like a shadow. Sarah suspected their time of comfortable neutrality was ending. The galaxy had ignored humanity because they were small and unimportant. Soon that might change. Soon Earth would have to decide what kind of civilization it wanted to be. The coffee in her cup had gone completely cold. Sarah set it aside and began preparing her detailed report. Earth needed to know everything: the number of refugees, their species composition, their level of desperation, and, most importantly, the size of the hegemony fleet pursuing them. Somewhere in the distance, stars died and civilizations fell. The war continued its terrible harvest, and humanity, for the first time since joining the galactic community, would have to face a simple question. What do you do when someone brings their fight to your door? Lord Admiral Crassus sat in his command throne, watching the primitive human worlds drift by on his view screen. Such insignificant beings, he thought. They had barely crawled beyond their home system when his people were already building empires. Yet here they stood, defying the hegemony's rightful authority. "Shall we begin the bombardment, Lord Admiral?" his weapons officer asked eagerly. "Not yet. Let them consider our generosity. In 60 hours, if they have not complied, we will demonstrate the price of defiance." Crassus touched a control, bringing up data on the human species. These creatures are young, barely a century in space. They will break easily. But Crassus had not become Lord Admiral by being careless. He had studied the reports from scout ships, the observations of human behavior over the past 50 years. There was something about this species that troubled him. They learned too quickly, adapted too efficiently. They reminded him of old stories, legends about the precursors that most considered myths. To prove his fleet's power, Crassus selected a small, uninhabited moon orbiting the human colony of New Seattle. He ordered his gunners to fire. The molecular disruptors lanced out, striking the moon's surface. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the entire moon began to shimmer, its atomic structure coming apart. Within minutes, a celestial body that had existed for billions of years was nothing but expanding dust. On Earth, President Vasquez watched the moon's destruction with a cold fury building in her chest. The hegemony wasn't just threatening them. They were showing off, demonstrating their technological superiority like a bully flexing his muscles. 60 hours, she said to her assembled advisors. What do we have? Dr. Okafor stepped forward, her tablet filled with data. We've made progress with the precursor artifacts, but it's not enough. We've identified what appears to be an energy source, possibly a power core of some kind. But we can't activate it safely. The energy readings are off our charts. What about conventional weapons? Admiral Torres asked. General Chen pulled up tactical displays. Our missiles are slower than theirs. Our ships are less armored. Our energy weapons have shorter range. In a straight fight, we lose badly. We'd be like ancient cavalry charging against tanks. Then we don't fight straight, said Captain Sarah Chen. She had been recalled from her observation station to join the planning session. I've watched these factions fight for 3 years. The hegemony has patterns, predictable tactics. They rely on overwhelming force and superior technology. They expect enemies to either run or face them head-on. So what do you suggest? Elena asked. We do what humans do best, we improvise. We use the environment, we hit them where they're not looking, and we make them fight on our terms, not theirs. Sarah pulled up star charts showing the human colonies. Every asteroid belt is a potential minefield. Every gas giant is a place to hide. Every civilian ship can become a missile if needed. You're talking about guerrilla warfare, Admiral Torres said with distaste. That's not how space battles are fought. Exactly, which is why it might work. Dr. James Wright joined the planning session remotely, his image appearing on screen from the refugee camps. Behind him, Zektar and other refugee leaders waited anxiously. We have something else, James said. Zektar's people have been fighting the hegemony for years. They know their weaknesses. Zektar stepped forward. The hegemony ships are powerful but slow to maneuver. Their shields are strongest at the front, designed for direct assault. Their command structure is rigid. If you kill the leadership, the lower ranks become confused and indecisive, and they have a weakness. Their molecular disruptors require massive energy draw. After firing, there's a recharge period of approximately 40 seconds. 40 seconds, General Chen repeated thoughtfully. That's an eternity in combat. There's more, Zektar continued. I and my warriors wish to fight beside you. We know we're asking you to risk everything for us. The least we can do is share that risk. Meanwhile, Captain Sarah Chen's former team at the observation station had intercepted hegemony communications. Lieutenant Park worked to decode the encrypted transmissions, his fingers flying across the keyboard. What he found made his blood run cold. Captain, you need to see this, he sent in a priority message. The hegemony's interest in Earth isn't random. They have records, ancient data. They think humans are connected to the precursors. Sarah read the intercepted files with growing alarm. The hegemony had been searching for precursor descendants for decades. They believed that any species carrying precursor genetics would eventually develop abilities that could challenge hegemony supremacy. Their solution was simple. Find and eliminate such species before they became threats. They're not here just for the refugees, Sarah reported to the council. They're here to exterminate us. Even if we surrendered every refugee, they'd still destroy Earth. We're the real target. The news changed everything. There would be no negotiation, no compromise. The hegemony intended to wipe out humanity regardless of what they did. The only question was whether humans would die on their knees or fighting. Earth mobilized like never before. Every shipyard worked at full capacity, converting civilian vessels into warships. Mining colonies reprogrammed their equipment to create improvised weapons. Scientists worked around the clock on the precursor artifacts, desperately trying to understand technology millions of years old. Dr. Okafor made a breakthrough in the 48th hour. Working with a team of human and refugee scientists, she managed to partially activate one of the crystalline spheres. It projected a holographic interface, symbols and diagrams that seemed to respond to human touch. It's recognizing us, she said with wonder. The artifact is keyed to human genetics. It's been waiting for us. The sphere revealed schematics for energy shields far more advanced than anything currently in use. The mathematics were elegant, the design brilliant. Human engineers immediately began adapting the principles to their existing technology. They wouldn't have time to build perfect precursor-level shields, but even crude copies would be better than nothing. Refugee engineers, particularly the small picks, proved invaluable. Their ability to work in tight spaces and see in different light spectrums allowed them to modify human ships in ways that would have taken weeks to do normally. Within 2 days, Earth's defensive fleet had doubled in effectiveness, even if it still appeared hopelessly outmatched. The refugee camps transformed into military training centers. Varan warriors trained human soldiers in close combat techniques. Shiran strategists shared tactical knowledge. The Near, whose aquatic nature seemed to make them useless in space combat, turned out to have natural abilities in three-dimensional navigation that made them excellent pilot trainers. We're all in this together now, Zektar told Elena during one of their planning sessions. Your people chose compassion over safety. That's rare in the galaxy. The hegemony fears strength, but they don't understand that compassion is a kind of strength too. As the deadline approached, Lord Admiral Crassus grew impatient. The humans should have surrendered by now, should have begged for mercy. Instead, his scouts reported increased military activity, ships moving into defensive positions, and energy readings that didn't match human technology profiles. They're planning to resist, his tactical officer reported. Foolish primitives. Perhaps not so foolish, Crassus murmured. He had read the ancient texts, the warnings about the precursor descendants. Accelerate our timeline. We attack in 12 hours. I want every human world targeted simultaneously. Leave nothing behind. The message was intercepted by Sarah's observation station. She immediately relayed it to Earth. The deadline had been moved up. The hegemony was coming early, and they were coming with full force. President Vasquez stood before the cameras, addressing not just Earth but all human colonies across the 12 systems. Her face was calm, but her voice carried steel. My fellow humans and our refugee friends who have joined us, In a few hours, we will face the greatest threat in our history. The hegemony thinks we're weak, that we'll break easily. They think our compassion is weakness, that our youth as a spacefaring species makes us vulnerable. They're wrong. Today we show them what humanity really is. Today we show them that bringing a war to our gates was the biggest mistake they ever made. The hegemony fleet arrived like a storm of metal and fire. 50 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space, their weapons already charging. Lord Admiral Crassus watched his tactical display with satisfaction. The humans had scrambled together perhaps 30 ships, cobbled together defense platforms, and what looked like converted mining vessels. It would be over in minutes. All ships begin bombardment pattern Alpha, Crassus ordered. Target the largest population centers first. Make an example of them. The fleet moved forward in perfect formation exactly as their doctrine dictated. They expected the human ships to either flee or charge directly into battle. Instead, something strange happened. The human vessels scattered in all directions, breaking into small groups that moved with no apparent coordination. "They're running," the tactical officer said with contempt. But they weren't running. Captain Sarah Chen commanded a retrofitted cargo hauler that now bristled with improvised weapons. Her crew was a mix of humans and Varan warriors, and they knew exactly what they were doing. As the hegemony fleet pushed deeper into the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, she gave the order. Now, thousands of asteroids that had been hollowed out and filled with explosives detonated simultaneously. The blast wave hit the hegemony formation from multiple angles. Shields flickered and strained. 2 of the smaller warships caught in overlapping explosions suffered critical damage. What was that? Crassus demanded, his calm cracking slightly. Before his crew could answer, human ships emerged from hiding spots throughout the belt. They didn't engage in traditional combat. Instead, they fired missiles that split into dozens of smaller warheads, overwhelming point defense systems. They used the asteroids as cover, popping out long enough to fire, then disappearing again. A converted mining ship, commanded by a Pix engineer named Tikri, launched what appeared to be a cloud of metallic dust. The hegemony fleet flew through it without concern, until the dust particles activated. Each one was a microscopic explosive, designed to stick to ship hulls and detonate on command. The resulting damage was minimal individually, but thousands of micro-explosions across multiple ships began degrading armor and disrupting sensor arrays. "This isn't how warfare works," the hegemony tactical officer protested. "This is chaos." "Adapt," Crassus snarled. "Reform the fleet. Maximum shields. Prepare the molecular disruptors." But adapting took time, and the humans didn't give them time. General Chen coordinated the defense from Earth, watching dozens of different battle groups execute seemingly random attacks. In reality, every strike was carefully planned, designed to exploit the 40-second recharge window of the disruptors and the slow maneuverability of the massive hegemony ships. The battle spread across multiple systems. At New Seattle, human colonists had turned their solar collection arrays into improvised beam weapons. The energy output was pathetic compared to military weapons, but when 30 arrays focused on the same point, they could overwhelm shields through sheer persistence. At Proxima Station, Admiral Torres led a defense that looked suicidal. He brought his flagship, the UNES Resolution, into close range with a hegemony cruiser, too close for the big weapons to target effectively. Then human marines, trained by Varan warriors in zero-gravity combat, launched boarding pods. The hegemony crew, trained for ship-to-ship combat, found themselves fighting enemies in their own corridors. The boarding action was brutal. Human marines used the ship's environment against its crew, venting sections to space, cutting power, and generally creating chaos. The hegemony troops were better armed and better armored, but they fought rigidly, by the book. The humans fought like cornered animals, using every dirty trick they could think of. Meanwhile, Dr. Okafor and Dr. Wright were making a critical discovery. Working in a laboratory deep beneath Geneva, they had finally managed to fully activate one of the precursor artifacts. The crystalline sphere opened like a flower, revealing something that looked like a circuit board made of light. "It's a genetic key," James said, his voice shaking with excitement and fear. The precursors didn't just leave artifacts behind. They encoded information into DNA itself, spreading it across multiple species throughout the galaxy. Humans are one of the carrier species. "What kind of information?" Okafor asked. "Everything. Technology, history, knowledge. It's all locked in our genes waiting to be activated. James touched the artifact and something changed. He felt it in his cells, a sudden awakening of potential that had always been there. The hegemony was right to fear us. We're not descendants of the precursors. We are precursors, just reset, waiting to remember. The activation of the artifact sent a pulse of energy across Earth and its colonies. Every human felt it, a moment of clarity and connection. Soldiers found themselves moving faster, thinking clearer. Engineers suddenly understood technologies they had only theorized about. Pilots flew with impossible precision. Captain Sarah Chen felt the change during a desperate engagement with a hegemony destroyer. Her ship was damaged, limping, but suddenly she could see the battle in her mind with perfect clarity. She knew where every enemy ship would be, understood their tactics as if she had written them herself. She maneuvered through a field of incoming fire that should have been impossible to dodge. "Target their port power coupling," she ordered with absolute certainty. "Fire everything we have." The missiles struck true. The destroyer's power grid overloaded, and the massive ship went dark, drifting helplessly. Across the battle space, similar stories played out. Human crews that had been barely holding on suddenly fought with precision and confidence. The awakening wasn't making them superhuman. It was unlocking the potential that had always been there, the genetic legacy of beings who had once shaped galaxies. Lord Admiral Crassus watched his perfect battle plan fall apart. The humans weren't fighting fair. They used the environment, exploited every weakness, and fought with a creativity that his rigid training had never prepared him for. Worse, they were getting better as the battle progressed, as if learning and adapting in real time. "My lord, we've lost 8 ships," his tactical officer reported, "and the smaller vessels are suffering severe damage. Their tactics are unprecedented." Crassus made a decision. "Prepare to fire the molecular disruptor at Earth itself. If we cannot control them, we will eliminate them." The dreadnought's main weapon began to charge. On Earth, alarms screamed. The massive gun was targeting the planet's core. One shot would tear the entire world apart from the inside. Billions would die. Captain Chen saw the energy reading spike on her sensors. She was too far away to intervene. No one was close enough to stop it. The weapon would fire in seconds. Then something unexpected happened. The artifact in the Geneva laboratory pulsed again, brighter this time. Dr. Okafor and Dr. Wright stumbled back as it rose into the air, energy crackling around it. The artifact wasn't just awakening human potential. It was calling to others like it. On Earth's moon, buried for millions of years, something answered. A structure the size of a city activated, systems coming online for the first time since the precursors vanished. It was a defense platform, ancient but functional, and it recognized the hegemony dreadnought as a threat. A beam of pure energy, technology so advanced it seemed like magic, lanced out from the moon. It didn't destroy the dreadnought. Instead, it simply shut it down. Every system, every weapon, every light went dark. The molecular disruptor, seconds from firing, powered down harmlessly. The hegemony fleet stopped dead. For the first time in the battle, there was silence. Lord Admiral Crassus sat in his darkened command throne, emergency lights flickering, and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: fear. On Earth, President Vasquez watched the moon structure with awe. "What is that?" "That," Dr. Okafor said softly, "is what the hegemony was afraid we'd find. That's our inheritance." Captain Chen opened a communication channel to the hegemony fleet. Her voice was calm, but it carried across every ship in the battle. "Lord Admiral Crassus, you came here to destroy what you feared we might become. You were right to be afraid. But understand this, we didn't want this fight. You brought it to us. Now stand down, or discover what else our ancestors left behind." The choice was Crassus's. Continue fighting against an enemy that had just revealed it possessed weapons beyond his understanding, or retreat and admit defeat. His pride demanded he fight. His survival instinct demanded he run. For a long moment, the fate of the battle hung in balance. Lord Admiral Crassus stared at his darkened screens and made the only choice that made sense. "All ships withdraw. Fall back to the outer system." The hegemony fleet retreated, limping away from the human defensive positions with 12 ships destroyed and another 20 badly damaged. It was the first time in living memory that the hegemony had been forced to retreat from a weaker opponent. As they withdrew, Crassus sent a message directly to President Vasquez. You have won today, human leader. But this is not over. My superiors will hear of this defeat. The full might of the hegemony will return. Elena watched the alien ships disappear into the darkness of space. Around her, the command center erupted in cheers. They had done the impossible, had driven back the galaxy's most feared military. But she felt no joy, only a cold certainty that this was just the beginning. The moon structure continued to pulse with power. Its systems fully active now. Dr. Okafor's team established a connection with it, accessing data repositories that had been sealed for millions of years. What they found changed everything humanity thought they knew about themselves. The precursors didn't disappear, Dr. Wright explained to the assembled Global Defense Council 3 days after the battle. They chose to scatter themselves to reset. They had become so powerful, so advanced, that they feared what they might become, so they encoded their knowledge and abilities into DNA, spreading it across hundreds of worlds, then erased their own memories and started over. Why? Elena asked. Because power without wisdom leads to tyranny. The precursors had conquered the galaxy, but in doing so, they had lost something essential. So they gave their descendants a chance to rediscover not just the technology, but the wisdom to use it properly. They wanted their children to learn compassion, cooperation, and humility before gaining godlike power. Admiral Torres looked at the data with troubled eyes. So what does this make us? Are we human or are we something else? We're both, James said simply. We're humans who carry within us the potential to become something greater. But that potential means nothing without the choices we make. The battle had proven that humans possessed abilities beyond what anyone expected. The genetic awakening had enhanced their reflexes, their thinking, their intuition. Engineers understood complex systems instinctively. Doctors could diagnose diseases with a glance. Pilots flew as if their ships were extensions of their bodies. But with that power came a choice that would define humanity's future. They could use their newfound abilities to dominate, to build an empire, to become what the hegemony feared most. Or they could use that power differently. The consortium arrived 2 weeks later, their fleet appearing at the edge of human space. Their ambassador, a tall insectoid being named Zixtet, requested a meeting. Elena agreed, curious about what the other major galactic power wanted. We have observed your battle with the hegemony, Zixtet said, its translated voice carrying tones of calculation. Your species shows remarkable potential. The consortium wishes to offer an alliance. Together we could bring order to the chaotic galaxy. With our logic and your newfound abilities, we would be unstoppable. It was tempting. The consortium offered protection, resources, and an end to the constant threat from the hegemony. But their version of order meant every being serving the collective individual freedom sacrificed for efficiency. Elena had seen the reports from consortium worlds. Populations turned into worker drones, creativity stifled, and diversity eliminated in the name of optimal function. Thank you for the offer, Elena said carefully, but humanity must find its own path. The rejection surprised Zixtet. No one refused the consortium. They were logical, efficient, and powerful. What could these young humans possibly offer that was better? Elena showed them. Working with the refugee leaders and her own advisors, she proposed something radical. A new galactic order, not based on conquest or forced collectivism, but on cooperation and mutual respect. Earth would share the precursor technology they had unlocked, but only with civilizations that agreed to basic principles. No genocide, no slavery, and no wars of aggression. You're proposing to enforce peace, Zixtet observed, through threat of superior force. How is that different from the hegemony? Because we're offering a choice, Elena replied. The hegemony demands submission. We're offering partnership. Any civilization that wants to join this new alliance can do so freely. Those who prefer war will find that we've made warfare obsolete. To demonstrate, Dr. Okafor activated another precursor system, this one hidden in an asteroid near Jupiter. It was a network, a web of satellites that could extend across the entire galaxy. When active, it could detect any military technology and, if necessary, shut it down remotely. No ships, no weapons, no wars. The implications were staggering. Humanity had found a way to enforce peace without firing a shot. But it required trust, a leap of faith that every civilization would choose cooperation over conflict when war was no longer an option. Admiral Torres was skeptical. What if they refuse? What if the hegemony decides to attack anyway? Consequences be damned. Then we defend ourselves, General Chen said. But we don't conquer. We don't occupy. We simply prove again and again that war doesn't work anymore. The proposal spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Some civilizations embraced it immediately, seeing it as liberation from the constant threat of war. Others resisted, viewing it as human imperialism in disguise. The hegemony officially rejected it, though Crassus noted quietly that several hegemony client states were beginning to question their overlords. Captain Sarah Chen took command of the first peacekeeping mission. Her ship, newly upgraded with precursor technology, traveled to a border world where the hegemony and consortium were preparing for another battle. Instead of picking sides, she simply activated the network. Every weapon on both sides went silent. "This war is over," she announced to both fleets. "You can continue fighting if you want, but you'll have to do it with harsh language and angry looks." The galaxy has had enough bloodshed. It was surreal watching two massive fleets drift uselessly in space, their weapons inert. Some crews tried to reactivate their systems, but the precursor network was too sophisticated. After hours of futile attempts, the commanders of both fleets opened communication channels, and for the first time in decades, enemies talked instead of fought. Not every conflict ended peacefully. There were attempts to circumvent the network to develop weapons it couldn't detect. There were terrorist attacks by groups who preferred the old ways. But slowly, inevitably, the galaxy began to change. The refugee camps evolved into something new, integrated communities where different species lived and worked together. Zektar's Varan became teachers, training the next generation of peacekeepers. The Pix engineers helped rebuild war-torn worlds. The Sharan used their processing abilities to mediate disputes between civilizations. Dr. Wright established the Galactic Academy, a place where beings from any world could come to study and learn. The curriculum included not just technology and science, but history, art, and philosophy. Students learned about the precursors not as gods to worship, but as a cautionary tale about the dangers of power without wisdom. 3 years after the battle that changed everything, President Vasquez stood in a vast chamber on a neutral world, surrounded by representatives from hundreds of civilizations. This was the first session of the Galactic Council, a governing body designed to replace war with dialogue. Lord Admiral Crassus was there, no longer a military commander, but representing the new hegemony government. The old regime had fallen, replaced by leaders who understood that the age of conquest was over. Zixtet represented the consortium, which had reluctantly accepted that their collective efficiency was less appealing than individual freedom. "We gather today not as conquerors or conquered," Elena began, "but as partners in building something better. The precursors left us a gift not of weapons but of possibility. They showed us that any civilization, no matter how primitive or advanced, can choose peace, can choose to build instead of destroy, can choose to see differences as strengths rather than threats." She looked at the assembled beings, thinking about how far they had all come. Earth stayed out of the galactic war for decades. We watched from the shadows, afraid to get involved, afraid of being crushed by forces beyond our understanding. But when the war came to our gates, when beings fleeing genocide sought shelter in our space, we made a choice. Not to turn away, not to fight for dominance, but to protect those who needed protection, and to prove that another way was possible. Zektar stood, his gray fur now streaked with white. "The humans saved my people when no one else would. They risked everything for strangers. That compassion, that courage is what makes them worthy of the precursor legacy. Not their technology or their newfound abilities, but their hearts." The council session continued for days, hammering out the details of the new order. There would be disputes, setbacks, and challenges. Some civilizations would resist change, some groups would cling to the old ways. But the foundation was laid for something unprecedented, a galaxy at peace. Captain Chen returned to Earth for a brief visit, bringing her daughter to see the monument that had been built at the site where the first refugee ships landed.